This is Life Transformation Radio. Prepare to engage. Seatbelt activated. Download initiated. Your quantum journey of transformation begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Life Transformation Radio. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Actis, best-selling author of The Law of Action, voice actor, business mindset coach, the podcast whisperer, and Mr. Action himself. Life Transformation Radio is heard in over 90 countries. Thank you for joining us from all around the world. If it's your first time joining us, or you've been listening to Life Transformation Radio for some time, I want to personally thank you. Here at Life Transformation Radio, we are committed to share more about real life, love, the power of positivity, romance, and of course, laughter. We care about helping others find their internal drive and purpose. We celebrate life's challenges and overcoming them. Also, personal invitation from me to you. Please join us on Facebook in the Life Transformation Radio community. On the show, my guests are amazing people who are forces for good in the world around them and live a life of transformation. My guest today, he does just that. Today, Edge Bassette and I discuss how to change your attitude to become a problem solver. If you want to learn how to overcome the feeling of hopelessness and defeat, start noticing those around you who are there for you, and learn to change your attitude to become a better problem solver, this is the show for you. Edge grew up in Chicago's housing projects. During his younger years, he was engulfed in poverty and violence. He earned a scholarship to college and became a sales superstar, while at the same time, his best friend, who was murdered on the streets of Chicago. He and his family are on a mission to help the world with 7 of the world's needs. We'll be discussing that today. Edge, welcome to Life Transformation Radio.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Absolutely. So, that is definitely a pivotal part of transformation of your life, of growing up in the Chicago housing projects. Like, what was that like?
Well, it actually had 2 different parts to it because my dad was from World War II, so he would be 101 years old now if he was still alive. He passed away at 85 years old, so about 15 years ago. And the wonderful thing about it, Rob, is I'm the youngest of 9 children. So when you're the youngest of 9, and I had 6 older sisters. And so my parents, when they talk about the way we grew up, it was almost like having 2 different sets of children, as you can imagine. You had the older set and you had a younger set. Wow. So my older siblings always talk about how life was when they were there compared to life when I was growing up. And for your question was, how was it? Well, the inner city, when the veterans came back from the Second World War, they built community housing for the Black soldiers coming back. And so this particular housing that they developed in Chicago was right off the lakefront, about 15 minutes from downtown Chicago. Right. And it was a community of row houses. And so when you moved in there, you had to be married and you had to be a veteran to get into that community. Okay. So that was in the 40s and the 50s. By the time we came along in the 60s and 70s, the community started to change. And so you're talking about 2 different eras. So let me ask you a question. So was that, so the soldiers that are coming back from World War II, so to take care of them after what they'd been through, they set it up so they're married, they're setting up housing, and they made it nice for everybody. And then what happened is, did these veterans pass away, and then there was almost like a change of guard or ownership, or where did things transition? Because I'm familiar with that. And they were actually very,
safe communities. They were very proud of their communities, and they took great care of their properties, and they had skin in the game, and they were disciplined from being in the military, and they were thrilled that they had a roof over their head. So when did things change, or how did it change?
Well, between the 40s and 50s, and then in the 60s, when I was coming up, what happened, from my understanding and what I wrote about in my book, was that the community started to change when integration came in. So people started moving into better neighborhoods, because Chicago was a very segregated city. So most of the people lived in one area. Like, my dad went to school with a guy named Nat King Cole. You heard of that guy before?
Chances are, I love it. Yeah, I love Nat King Cole.
Their lockers were next to each other.
Wow.
So back in those days, everybody lived in the same community. So the stars and the rock stars and all these guys and the cab drivers, the business owners, they all lived on the south side of Chicago.
Right.
Because that's where Black people live. But as integration started, people start moving out further and further. And as people moved out, the younger people started taking over the housing. And this is when during this time in the 60s and 70s.
So the hippies,
neighborhood started,
the hippies got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so there was a changeover. And I remember distinctly, because when we were kids, we would go around and we would look at all our dad's cars. My best friend Ray, who I wrote about in my book, his dad always got Oldsmobiles. My dad always got Chryslers, and my other buddy's dad always got Chevys.
Yeah.
So we all had parents. We all had two parents. But as the next generation came in, that's when the single parent family started moving in.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, it takes a village to raise kids. It just does. I mean, my daughter just moved back into the home after she had a transformation in her life, and she was back east. I just got done taking a moving truck and moving her over here back in with Dad, and it's wonderful to have her here. And she has a tribe. I have this incredible tight knit group of people that are in my life, and they're all reaching out to her and how can they help her, and she's kind of overwhelmed in that because I can't do it all for her. I can't be everything for her. And so it does take that tribe. And, it's not, I think they call it the nuclear family, but you need to have that guidance from both. Right. I mean, I will say one thing, the single family, if we're talking about Black families, is I've seen some videos, and I saw this one, and there was a guy, and he was protesting, and his mom came out, and she just beat the living tar out of him. He was acting all tough and beating on people and stuff. And she came out here and grabbed him and started beating him. You better get your butt home. I'm going to, and you need that. I mean, as kids, you need guidance, and, exactly. You have to have that structure. And it breaks my heart to know that a lot of kids grow up without any structure, and they crave it. Mm-hmm. And I think they lash out because they don't have it. They may not want it, but when they get it, they know that it makes their life better because, look, your dad lived to be 101 years old or, 85. My dad's 90 years old. My mom's 93.
Wow.
You live to be a long time now. So if you're, if you're having a difficult time at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and you've got 60 more years to go, that's a long time to be unhappy. And so it's so important that they have that structure. Yeah.
And one of the things I know all kids grew up with this, you better be in when the lights come on.
My God, it's so great.
Everybody.
They'll say how old that Edge and I are. It's so funny because my mom used to wake up, in the morning, and it'd be like 7:00 in the morning. You go, what are you doing? Get up. What? Get out. Go play. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Be back by when the light comes on. Or you remember you're playing in the street and then it's like, dinner! You hear all the moms in the neighborhood yelling dinner. But different times, but I always shoot out of the house. Like, get out.
Yeah.
Go figure it out.
Yeah.
Go find, here's some, some sugar pops and you can have breakfast and, go figure out lunch. Maybe you can swing in and grab something, but you get out. You're on your own. Come back when it's dark.
Yeah. And that's where my book started, with the commonality of things, that everybody's the same. And then as time went on, my best friend started talking about, we were going to be baseball heroes. I mean, we came up when the Chicago Cubs, remember, I don't know if you might, I'm older than you, I think, the 69 Cubs. The 69 Cubs were supposed to win it all.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And then the New York Mets came in and won the pennant, and the Cubs just totally folded. And they had players like Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, and all of these guys, Ron Santo. And so Chicago was doomed to be the lovable losers back in the late 60s. And so during that era, every kid played baseball. Every kid, back with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Steel Curtain, and we all played football and baseball.
Kind of like The Sandlot, the movie The Sandlot. Everybody was playing, stickball, baseball, wherever they could figure out to make their own little field and stuff.
Yeah, and that's where everybody. So my best friend said, "Man, I'm going to be a baseball player, and you're going to be a football player, and we're going to make it, and we're going to be rich one day." And that was every kid's dream,
right?
To be something special. But Rob, as time went on, and by the time we got in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, things started to change, and that's when the neighborhood, the new people that were coming in, they were more. They were just different. The kids were. You could tell that they just didn't have a discipline.
Right.
One, they didn't have a dad at home. They didn't have, and this is where the whole thing with welfare and the one mom and more kids. And we started seeing that for ourselves because they were just different kids than we were. But what started happening is that started, those kids started mingling with the good kids, and then some people fell prey to the vices that were coming into the community, which was drugs, gang, violence.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's the interesting thing about drugs, or not drugs, but about, well, two things. When you have a lot of stress in your life and you have a lot of turmoil in your life, you want to feel okay. So what are two things you do? You turn to drugs because you get to escape, or you find family wherever you can, and that's where the gangs step right in and they fill that void. Exactly.
And so what started out as a very innocent, just boys wanting to be boys, we started being sucked into what the world dealt with. I remember when we were kids, we grew up in an all-black community on the South Side, so we didn't know any other race.
Right.
So when we started playing sports, we had to go out and the little league teams, and we had to play against other communities, and that's where race. We started hearing, "Oh, these kids don't like you. These kids are going to do this." So we were hysterical because that's what we were hearing. Like, we're going to go to these games and never make it back home, So what I wrote about was just the fun. You could see the transition of innocence and a little bit being taken out each time.
Right.
And so, by the time we got into high school, things started to really change. And there's an area in Chicago that even former President Trump talked about, the Englewood area of Chicago.
Right.
Now, the area that I was growing up in on the south side of Chicago, which had the homes where the veterans lived, that community was called Ida B. Wells housing. That started to change, as I said. But then the second area where I went to high school was called Lindblom in the Englewood area. That became the second worst area. So the area I grew up in started to become the first area, because what they built around all of the low-rise houses that we lived in was the high-rises. You remember how you start seeing the high-rise, 15-story, 16-story, 20-story? So they started building all of those into the communities. And there was one called Robert Taylor homes in Stateway Gardens. It was like 20 blocks with these huge 20-story housing.
They just became warehouses for people.
They became warehouses.
And it's terrible.
Man, that's when you started to see the real problems. They tried to move our family into one of those buildings, and my mom said, no way, we're not going. We're going to stay in the low rise. And that's when the action really started, man. And my dad was very, he stuck to the old ways. He was old school. So when the lights came on, even as a 13, 14-year-old, you had to be in the house. And so all my buddies was like, man, this is where everything is starting at.
That's when all the good stuff's happening. Right.
Yeah, I got to go in. But those were the things that helped save my life, because as time went on, I realized that what he was doing was he was giving me a chance.
Right.
And so that was where the distinction came, because my buddy started being sucked in more to what was going on. His parents separated, so he was just living with his mom. And here I was still living with my dad. So I couldn't get in trouble. Like my dad would tell me one thing, Rob. He said, if you get in trouble and the police get you, I'm not coming to get you.
Wow.
And that scared the heck out of me as a kid, because I did not want to be somewhere where my dad was not going to be there to support me. And so people would always ask me, what's the key to your success? And I would say, my dad was always there. I was one of the few guys in the neighborhood that still had his dad present, and he had that military, disciplinary, do things the right way. You know, if somebody tells you to be somewhere, be there 10 minutes early. And that really paid off in my life, because I would tell people all the time, just don't tell my father. I would say, whatever you do, don't tell dad.
Well, you remember the TV show Good Times, right? Was that the Chicago Projects? Was that Chicago Projects?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the north side. That was that was on the north side of Chicago, Cabrini Green. We were the south side version of that.
Yeah, because it was amazing to see the family dynamic in there, of the daughter who could do no wrong to daddy, which I thought was hilarious because she was a big, and then JJ, Mr. Dynamite, but that mom was super, super strong, and she was like the backbone of the family and kept everything moving. And then you had the dad, and he was the enforcer. He was the buck stops here. It was really, and it's interesting because, Michael used to get into a lot of trouble. He was the one that always got into trouble. JJ never got in trouble, but Michael was always the one. And, his dad would always bring him back. And, my heart really breaks for all the kids that have grown up. And I grew up without a dad. My parents got divorced when I was 5, and, it was, I would be different. Like, I don't have a lot of the sports gene, and I'm not handy at all. So, I was raised by girls, and, I had an older brother. So I kind of got a little bit of that because they kicked my butt a lot. And I'm thankful for that, but you need that enforcer. I mean, and I will say in the Black community and the women that I have met, those moms, they are forces to be reckoned with.
They had to be.
Yeah, exactly. And because they know they don't want to see anything happen to their kid. Right.
Well, just to let you know, I had 6 older sisters, and when their clothes got too small for them, they did give them to me. So just want you to know that. So there was a number of days, Rob, that I went to school, and I'm gonna share this with you. Don't tell anybody.
I won't.
I would have a blouse on, and the blouse, the one thing I learned about a blouse was that it buttoned the opposite way.
The other side. I discovered that exactly. That's so funny. I know. It's so funny.
So I would tell my mom, because people would say, you have on girl clothes. And I'd be like, these are not girl clothes. And I'll go home, I say, Mom, everybody say I got on girl clothes. So she would say, just tuck the collar in and nobody will know. So that's one of my signature stories, talking about the jeans I have on, blue jeans with little hearts on them.
Oh my God.
And,
that's so funny.
So yeah, so I had, even now imagine this. I'm growing up in the projects, one of the toughest areas.
And you're wearing jeans
Chicago,
with hearts on the butt, and you're wearing a girl's blouse. I love it.
But I got on jeans with.
Oh my God, that is hilarious.
So that's the irony. That's the irony of growing up like that, is that, and part of what I learned how to do is to make fun of it and to talk about it, because that's part of your story, is that it's not all tough. And, I was never in a gang. I was always an athlete. And athletes would get a pass to an extent because they always wanted us to make it. Like even the gangbangers, they would say, okay, don't touch the athletes.
Right.
Because these are the guys that can make it. And so we grew up admiring guys like Kirby Puckett grew up in the projects down on the South Side. He was a famous baseball player. But we had guys who were big time. Walt Frazier, who played for the New York Knicks. Walt Frazier dated my next door neighbor and he's still to this day, he's one of the biggest stars in New York, because that was the last time the New York Knicks won the NBA championship, was with Walt Frazier.
Wow.
So we have guys who clearly came from that environment. But as we went into high school, as I said, my best friend was, I was going to a school in the Englewood area, and he was back in the neighborhood. And when I was going there, the gangs had started up really, really bad in the Englewood area. And so I was robbed at gunpoint or knife point. Wow. At least 7 or 8 times during that time. Wow. And I didn't think I was going to make it out of high school to get to college. And so I asked my dad, I said, if you let me play football in high school, so I won't be able to work a job, but I guarantee you, if you let me play football, I'll earn a scholarship to college.
Wow.
That was the deal that we had.
Well, you talk about, being around violence. I have a very dear friend of mine, Victoria, and she grew up in Detroit. Beautiful blonde, grew up in Detroit in a really tough neighborhood. And it's amazing because she's now a bail bondsman. That's what she does. And it's funny because I said, I think about it and I said, that's pretty amazing, you being a bail bondsman. And she goes, yeah, I grew up in Detroit. I'm good. And I'm like, wow, that's, it's amazing. And it just, I asked you originally, what was it like? And I want to just dive in that a little bit more of just dig deep for a moment. And, you're seeing all of this happen around you. You were robbed 7 times, which is a terrible feeling. I've been robbed. I don't wish it on anybody. It's terrible. I've had a .357 Magnum put to my forehead. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. So I'm sorry that happened to you. And with everything that was going on in your life, you had to have had feelings of hopelessness and defeat and like, God, this is my life. This is, So how did you overcome that?
Well, that's a good question. What I did, and this is part of what I learned to do was, and it's the same thing we do today in the real world. I started looking at what could be, like what's the things that we can do in our lives down the road that we will accomplish if we pay the price today. So one of the things I had to do, Rob, and this is what I tell people all the time, is I had to be intentional about what I did. So I had to it was places I couldn't go, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
I had buddies that I couldn't ride in the car with. I had cousins that I couldn't let into my house. I lived next door to my cousins, and my dad said, don't let them in because they'll steal something. So
wow.
These were my first.
Wow. And that's family?
That's family. But my dad was very intentional. He was a very private person. So he taught me that everybody wasn't good for you.
Right.
And I had to learn that at a very early age because it meant survival. Because if I was in the wrong predicament, when I walked out the hallway of my house, imagine this. I'm in the projects. We're on the second floor. When you walk out of the hallway, you walk out of your house, there's a hallway. Someone has already broken the light that's in the hallway, so you can't see when you get outside. Now, you don't know who's in there.
Right.
It could be somebody laying in there. It could be somebody waiting for you to rob you. So you had to literally, once you stepped out of your house, you had to protect yourself from the morning that you left out to the night when you got back. One day I was robbed 2 times, once going to school and once coming back home from school. And so I told my dad, I said, I just don't think I'm going to make it to get out of high school. I said, I don't think I'm going to live. And this is what kids, so that's what I try to explain to people is that here I am, I'm a good kid. I'm playing football, I'm playing baseball, never been in any trouble, but yet my life is being threatened every day because of the community that I'm in, not anything that I'm doing personally. I went to one of the top academic high schools in Chicago in order to
point A to point B, right? But you still have to get from point A to point B.
Exactly. You had to get into school and you had to get out of the school. You had to take the public transportation to get back and forth, which was the Chicago Transit Authority bus or the CTA, what we call the train that you took. And you could get on that bus and it could be 7 or 8 guys and they look at you and they want you to take your shoes off.
Yeah.
I mean, one day they one of my buddies, I got off the bus before him, and before I could even walk across the street, he said, man, there's 7 guys behind us and they want my watch. And I didn't even look around. We just knew how to fight. That's what we had to do.
Right.
So we just got back to back. We put our backs together and these guys surrounded us. And we just started fighting and swinging in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
And that was part of my life. That was just part of my existence was you had to know how to fight. You had to know how to survive. But it made me a better football player. It made me more focused on my goal, which was to get to college. It made me more compassionate to people who was trying to make it. But I had to be very intentional about what I did. And those things helped me. Once I got into college, I became a star football player. And even in the business world, it made me very focused. It's just like a guy going to the military and he has that discipline.
Right.
It was the same sort of discipline. So I used it to my advantage. And to this day, people ask me, they say, man, you just don't seem like you came from the inner city. I say, because you adapt what you have and you use it for good. You use it to help. You use it to make a difference. And I said, that's what I instilled in my children. That's what I married a person. My wife, it'll be 36 years next week on September 1st that we'll be married. My college sweetheart. And she's from the inner city also. And she's a project manager. And of course, she's written books. And then I have 3 children, and they've all graduated from college. And we all work together as a family. But that came from that commitment of saying when I was walking home from school, I said, I never want anybody to feel this way.
Yeah. All right, let me ask you a question. So one of the things that I always ask, I have incredible stories here on Life Transformation Radio, and some are just unbelievable. Like the story you just shared is unbelievable. And what you have gone through and make it out the other side is remarkable. And I'm so thrilled that you have, because you crossed my path and I get to share a little time with you and a little bit about that. And then I've had people that have been sex trafficked, or people that have been, addicted to drugs and have done horrible things and survived. And, the one thing I like to ask people is, if you could go back knowing who you are today and the impact that you have in the world today and who you are as Edge today, would you, if you could go back in a time machine, would you change anything of your past?
If I could change something in my past?
Would you? Would you? Based on who you are today as a man, would you change your past?
I don't think so. I think what I would do is continue to do what I'm trying to do every day. Yep. One of the things as we reach our 36th anniversary, one of the stories I'm putting out is that I hold my wife's hand every night before we go to sleep. And when we wake up in the morning, we hold hands.
Oh, look at you, hopeless romantic. I love that. I just smiled. I just felt all, man, I love that. I love that. Man. I like, you know what? This is recorded live on Clubhouse with an audience, and I'm at Edge in a room, and I just fell in love with it. I'm like, I really want you on Life Transformation Radio. And you know what? I was so right. You're just really an amazing guy, Edge. I really want to thank you for being here today. You are definitely someone who has made a significant impact in the world and continue to do that. And you definitely live a life of transformation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I make sure that I hold this lady's hand, and I tell her every day that I love her.
Oh, it's so sweet.
She was, and our last name, we pronounce it Bassetti, like spaghetti.
Yeah.
So when she met me, I was a football star. And when she told me her story, she had been abused by her stepdad, physically abused, like beaten and slapped and hit. And she told me her story. And this is what I told her 38 years ago. I said, when you look back at our lives, at the end of our lives, you're going to say, I had a good life with this man. I said, that's the one promise I'm going to make you, is that I'm never going to leave you. And you're going to say you had a good life at the end of this.
Wow.
And so,
love it.
And I stuck to that because that was my honor to have. And then as a African-American male, what I wanted to do was to make sure that my kids had one dad. I have 3 children. I've raised them. I have a nurse practitioner, an engineer, and a fashion design major. And we talk every day. We share thoughts. We work together as business partners, and that's what family is. And if I could teach one other person to do this, I've done my part.
Well, you have definitely done your part. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone, for your support and taking the time out of your busy and precious day to listen to Life Transformation Radio. We so appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me, along with my very special guest and new friend, Edge, to touch your heart, move your soul, and inspire you to live a life of transformation. I'm Rob Actis. Until next time.
This is Life Transformation Radio. Download complete.